Good morning, friends. Mr. Casey here with another week of Kids Club. Are you guys excited to hear the next chapter in our story of God's family? I hope so. This week, I get to share a really fun part of the story. I think you'll really like it. And of course, I've got my story bag. Do you want to see what's inside? Some of these things you might remember from some of our previous weeks, like Abraham's binoculars, or baby Isaac's bottle. I remember those stories about God's special promise to make Abraham's family a great big family. What about Joseph's colorful coat? Oh, I love that part of the story too. God's family kept growing bigger and bigger. And when Joseph came along, they went to a new place where they were builders. You remember from last week. They were builders for the king of Egypt. But did the king treat them fairly? No. Was the king mean to them? Yes, he was. Every time the people in God's family asked the king for help, he said no. So they decided to ask God for help. And remember, they called out to God and prayed and said, God, please send someone to rescue us. We're in trouble. And remember, friends, God heard that prayer, and God knew exactly who he was going to send to help rescue his people. And that person's name was Moses. And Moses was out walking out in the woods one day among the trees when all of a sudden he came upon this beautiful light. It was a beautiful, shining, sparkling light, and it was coming from one of the bushes out in the woods. Moses looked closely at this light. It was the most amazing, beautiful light he'd ever seen, and he came closer and closer. The light almost looked like fire. It almost looked like this bush was on fire. But the bush wasn't burning up like it would if it was really on fire. It was just the most amazing thing Moses had ever seen. And as he came closer, he heard a voice. Whose voice was it? It was God's voice. Moses, the voice called. I have chosen you to be my special helper, to go and rescue my family from the king of Egypt. Will you help me? And Moses felt very special to be chosen by God. He wasn't sure he was up to it, but God assured him and said, Moses, if you go and do this for me, know that I will always be with you. You don't have to be afraid. And so Moses agreed, and he knew that God would be with him. And so he decided to go talk to the king of Egypt. He went to the king. He went to the king's palace, and he said to the king, King, you must let God's family go free. They must not be your slaves anymore. You've got to let them go free. And do you know what the king said? He said, no. God's family must keep working for me. So Moses went home. And then he came back a second time. That next day that Moses came back, he asked the king the same thing. He said, King, will you please let God's family go free? What did the king say? No way. They must keep working. Moses went back a third time, a fourth time, a fifth time. Each time he asked the king the same question. Will you let God's family go free? And each time the king said, No, I will not let them go. A sixth time, Moses went back, 7, 8, and 9 times. Still, each time the answer from the king was no. But, friends, on the 10th time that Moses went back and spoke to the king, he asked this very same question. He said, "King, you must let God's family go." And do you know what happened, friends? Something shocking happened. The king said, "Okay." The king said yes. He said, "You can let God's family go free. They can go now. They don't have to be slaves anymore." God's family was so happy when they heard the news. They were so thankful to God. They rejoiced. They jumped up and down and danced. They were so excited. And they rushed and they hurried and packed up all of their bags and gathered up all their things to prepare for a long journey to a new place that God would show them. And I will tell you, friends, more about that long, long journey next week. I hope you liked that story. It is time, friends, to open up your activity packs and do today's activity. I hope you like it. And I will check in with you guys again next week. Hope you're enjoying this story about God's family. All right. Well, I'll see you next week, friends. Goodbye.